AEW has nearly 16,000 tickets sold for the Greensboro Coliseum for Revolution. It's about 300 shy of a sellout. And you can credit one thing for that. That is Sting's retirement match, which was made official on Dynamite. It will be Darby Allin and Sting defending their AEW World Tag Team titles against the Young Bucks. This after the Bucks beat Top Flight and then declared themselves #1 contenders. See, I gave them 6 months before they completely abandoned the rankings again. But at this rate, it may be a lot sooner than that. Darby Allin, in his promo on the Bucks on Wednesday, basically what he did here, he copy and pasted the criticism of the Bucks from places like Twitter and Jim Cornette's podcast, talking about how they turned all elite wrestling into all friendship wrestling and put people like Brandon Cutler on TV, and how at the time he came into the company, he said, "Thank God there was one EVP with brains. And I'm not talking about Kenny Omega," which kind of buried Omega there in a way. I don't think that was the intent, but in a way he kind of did. But he was talking about Cody Rhodes, which led to Cody chants. They designed this promo knowing that people would chant for Cody Rhodes, the man headlining WrestleMania, who has absolutely nothing to do with AEW anymore. You know, one thing that Tony Khan is very good at, I have to give him a lot of credit for this, is promoting the other brand, whether it's through his Twitter meltdowns or stuff like this. If this AEW thing doesn't work out, maybe the other con could hire him to work in their promotions department. I think he'd be very good at it. I thought the angle that they shot at the end of the show last week was sufficient, honestly, to put heat on the Bucks. It was a great old school wrestling angle that they did when they beat down Sting and they beat down Darby. I mean, think about it. They beat up Darby and they bloodied him up. They beat up Sting. They beat up Sting's kids. They came out this week with Darby's dried blood still on their suits. Like, I don't even understand why this was necessary. But they've also added a match between Konosuke Takeshita and Will Ospreay, who has officially finished up with New Japan, and he will be starting full-time with them at Revolution. I love it. I mean, that's going to be an amazing match. And I suspect that it will be the start, at least, of a babyface turn, or a turn away from the Callis family for Will Ospreay. But their rationale for doing it was ridiculous. Callis is doing a promo in the back. He's got Hobbs with him. He's got Takeshita with him. He's standing there and he says, well, there's no competition for Takeshita. So he decided to look within the family. And it was Don Callis' own idea to take two of his own guys and have them fight each other with the idea that we win either way because when it's over, we're all going to be on the same page. Which you know they're not going to be. Why he would willingly jeopardize the health of either man when he doesn't have to by putting them in a match against each other is something that cannot be explained. But this is what they came up with to get Ospreay on the show. I'm glad it's happening. It's completely nonsensical, but I'm happy we get to see it. That could be the match of the year easily. It's only February, and that could easily be the match of the year. Samoa Joe was on television on Wednesday. He eviscerated Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland on the microphone. That will be a three-way for the AEW World title. Swerve should not win the title yet. Joe deserves a longer run with that belt, and they have the perfect out by having Hangman eat the pin. It doesn't even have to be a pin. He could voluntarily tap out if there was some sort of double submission spot where Hangman thought Joe might tap to Swerve, and he's trapped, he can't go anywhere. So in a moment of panic, what does he do? He gives up first. Right? I mean, there's a few different ways they could go with that, but the point is, Hangman Page, this character, has become so obsessed with Swerve not being the champion that it's more important to him than winning the title itself. So he will be the reason why Swerve does not win. And you save Swerve from taking the loss himself, and that sets him up for a rematch down the road later in the year. They have the perfect out. Someone in the YouTube comments asked me, how does it make sense that Hangman is even in the match when Swerve already beat him 2 straight? Why wouldn't it be Swerve and Joe one-on-one? It doesn't. It doesn't make sense. But they probably don't want to put the belt on Swerve yet. So this was their way of getting around it. I mean, look, if we go to Revolution and Swerve Strickland wins the AEW World title, then I have no fucking idea why there was the need to make this a 3-way. You're absolutely right. But it's pretty clear to me that they're probably not putting the belt on Swerve just yet. And so this was their way of kind of getting around that. Hangman could be the fall guy in this match. Right? Better to have Hangman lose the match than Swerve. So I think that's why they're doing it this way. But I agree with you. I mean, Hangman does not deserve the shot. Not before Swerve. You know, they did a third match between them, and they went to a time limit draw. That still doesn't mean Swerve should not be ranked ahead of Hangman. And I think technically he is. I think they had him at 1 and Hangman at 2, but again, trying to make sense of that is pointless. These are all things, by the way, that if WWE had done them, and the reason I point these out, and it drives people nuts, it drives the AEW fans nuts, and this is something I was on full display for me this week. Because if I tell you the hate that I got coming out of that SmackDown stream I did on Friday night from all the Rock fans, all the Crybaby Cody fans that Rock talks about in storyline, right? You have an equal number of them on the other side. And there were some who actually, look, they were respectful and civil, and they pleaded their case, and they thought I was being dismissive with some stuff, and you know what? Fair enough. But then you have the dopes, you have the fucking weirdos, and there are a lot of them, who clearly also don't listen to the podcast. It's very clear to me when they say certain things, they don't actually listen to what I say. But the amount of just goober messages that I had to read this week from people when it comes to that. You got them on both sides. The AEW fans are no better. They're just as bad. And the slightest criticism sets them off. And the reality is this. If I didn't point these things out, because it does drive me nuts. That's why I point them out. If I didn't point this shit out, people would rightfully come at me and say, you know what? If this were WWE, you would point out that this doesn't make sense and that doesn't make sense. And where's the logic in this? And where's the logic in that? And you're right. You're absolutely right. But it drives them completely insane. And they will twist themselves into a pretzel trying to explain why it's fine and why it all makes sense. But they're really no better than the WWE tribalists. But for all the times I pointed it out with Vince's booking, I'm going to point it out with Tony. It doesn't get a pass. Some of the shit just doesn't make sense. Also on the Revolution card, I digress. Also on the Revolution card, Christian Cage is going to defend his TNT title. We just don't know yet against who. Adam Copeland and Daniel Garcia, they wrestled to decide who would be the number 1 contender until Killswitch and Nick Wayne ran in, and that caused a no contest. And then Christian bashed Copeland's brains in with a concerto, which usually means someone is taking some time off. We're so close to the pay-per-view, though, that would mean Garcia would get the shot, and then maybe they're going to hold off on Christian and Copeland for Double or Nothing. But it's possible that maybe Copeland misses a week, and then boom, there he is again. And because of the no contest, like with Hangman and Swerve with their draw, Tony Khan makes it a 3-way. Doing a 3-way for the world title and the TNT title on the same show, I think is a bit much. I don't like that. But if they want to move the TNT title onto a young guy and not just have 50-year-old Adam Copeland win the belt back for a second time, I can't hate on that. I mean, Garcia has been getting more over with their audience. I wouldn't mind Garcia getting a run as TNT champion. I'm just not a fan of making that match a 3-way if that's the plan. Eddie Kingston is going to put his Continental title on the line against Bryan Danielson. Danielson's year so far has been just ridiculous. This man wrestled Okada at the Tokyo Dome. He beat Yuji Nagata on Collision, then Hechicero on Collision, then he lost to Zack Sabre Jr. in Japan. Now he's wrestling Jun Akiyama on Collision next Saturday. Akiyama being one of Kingston's idols. Toni Storm defends her women's world title against Deonna Purrazzo, and Orange Cassidy defends the international title against Roderick Strong. Cassidy and Matt Taven, they main evented Dynamite in a Texas death match. They just sort of threw that out there, that these two would be having a Texas death match after Taven and Bennett spiked him on his head on Collision. Apparently that was enough to make this a Texas death match, but they went out there and they tried their best to live up to the stipulation. Both men bled. Taven took this hellacious bump over the top rope through a table that was leaned up against the announce desk, so it fucking snapped in half when he collided with it. Now Cassidy defends against Roddy at Revolution, and Roddy has to win that title. The Undisputed Kingdom is on life support right now. There can be no other outcome other than Roderick Strong winning the international title at Revolution. And last but not least here on the AEW front, QT Marshall has been hired back per Fightful. He will be in his old executive role as vice president, but he will no longer be wrestling for AEW. He does, however, have permission to wrestle outside of AEW, pretty much anywhere except WWE. QT Marshall, the George Costanza of All Elite Wrestling, quits on a Friday. On Saturday, he realizes I've made a terrible mistake. Shows back up to work on Monday like nothing ever happened, hoping no one will notice.